What up, guys? Joachim here, Joachim Justin Morgan. In this video, I'm going to discuss the topic of head coverings. As you may have noticed from my voice and from videos where I'm actually on screen, I'm on the camera. I'm in fact not a woman, so I don't, as it relates to myself personally, have a ton of strong fixed views on this. At least I didn't until here more recently. But it's not a topic that's burned into my mind very often, or something that I give a whole lot of thought to. But we've come across the passage in 1 Corinthians chapter 11 several times, where St. Paul is writing to the Corinthian church, and he makes this statement. He says, "Every woman who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head. It is the same as having her head shaved." I'll have the actual passage up on the screen in a moment, because I saved it as a screenshot to go over in this video. But that we come up with that, or we cover that, at least once a year, sometimes more often. It comes up just because of that and other passages that are discussed in 1 Corinthians chapter 11 as a family. And but it wasn't until a girl was at our church and she wore a head covering. Many of the women at my church actually wear head coverings. It's probably, getting now to close to 50%. It used to be a lot less. Maybe 10% of the women at my church wore head coverings, and most of them were women from Russia or some more traditional country. But here in the past couple years, it has been it has become far more dominant that there's larger numbers of women coming to the church that are wearing head coverings. So it came up in conversation at coffee hour one day, and a girl was making a point for why she wore a head covering. And my wife afterwards, we were talking. She was just telling. I wasn't at the table at the time. So later my wife was telling me some of the conversation, and she just asked, do you think that I should wear a head covering? And I thought of this passage from the New Testament, and I thought, well, I don't want to tell you, you have to wear a head covering, because many of the women at church don't. But, if it were me, I think I would wear one because it's in the Bible, because it tells you to. So I don't really have a justifiable reason, for myself, if I were a woman, that I wouldn't. As a man, it actually commands me not to wear a head covering in church. So I'll cover that as well. So I would not wear a head covering in church because I'm a man. That was how I took the response, and my wife actually started wearing head coverings after that. So I don't know. But anyways, this came up on this page. I became a member recently of this, the Orthodox Life. I do not recommend this group. I actually think it's not that great of a group. In fact, a lot of the people kind of have these very, I think, strange views. Lots of the responses to this question were you need to relax, don't be judging others. And this seems like a very genuine question. I'll read the question that's on the screen, and then I'll kind of go over that. But she says, I go to a Greek Orthodox church, and none of the women cover their heads. Is there a reason why? I've been trying to veil for full time for honor to God and modesty reasons, but I feel awkward if I would do it at church, the one place I should. She puts that all in capitals. But lots of the responses I thought were really weird, weirdo responses. You need to relax, you need to chill out, don't be judging others. If you feel like you need to, then so be it, but just don't think yourself better than others, which, I don't disagree with some of those sentiments, but I don't really get the hyperbolic kind of jumping on her for having asked the question. And I feel like there's a lot of people that when this topic comes up, a lot of their opinions are given to the passions. Those are not dispassionate responses. Those are responses of people that I think, maybe I'm judging them, but the responses they're giving seem to be the response of people given to the passions, and that they're responding out of those passions. They're responding out of offense, or conviction of their own choices, not to the actual question at hand. So this was my wife. I threw these in. There's a lot of the women at our church that wear head coverings, and it has become more normal here recently. You can see some there that don't. So it's not like a huge thing. This is my daughter. She doesn't wear a head covering usually. Her name's Abigail. And I saw it put in some different styles. This was like more like the Latin, Western kind of head veil that you typically saw. Or that you would see like in Ireland or Spain or, more traditional Western countries. This is kind of more what you probably see in like Slavic countries. So there's different styles, I guess. And this is the passage from 1 Corinthians chapter 11. And it says in verse 6, "For if a woman be not covered, let her be shorn. But if it be a shame to a woman to be shorn or made bald, let her cover her head. The man indeed ought not to cover his head, because he is the image and glory of God, but the woman is the glory of the man." So I couldn't go into too much detail on what exactly that means, but it seems like a pretty clear statement that you should wear head covering. So my train of thought was, well, what do the church fathers, what are the church canons, what are these people in different tradition say about this? Because the claims that people were making on this post to this woman was, it's not a tradition. There is no theological statement that women have to wear head coverings. And I'm like, well, is that true? And what I found was that is not true. There are actual church canons that do cover head coverings, and there are statements by church fathers that discuss this. And then I also did some searching into history and when this stopped, because it was a normative practice. You won't find icons or historical things of women, Christian women in church that did not wear head coverings. It was worldwide a normative thing to do. So this video is just kind of cover some of that information. I put up some icons. There was one exception that I found. You see different saints. It's not. The norm is that women wear head coverings. The exception is Saint Mary of Egypt here. Saint Mary. So I guess if you're going to move out to the desert as a recluse and live by yourself, you probably don't need to worry about a head covering. Of course, Saint Mary of Egypt did not go to church. The only time that we know of in her story that she actually went to church was when she went to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, I think. She went to Jerusalem, and she was barred from entering until she prayed to the Mother of God to allow her to enter. And then she dedicated herself as a monastic afterwards and goes out to the desert. She was given the Eucharist by St. Zosimus, and so that's the only record of her actually having been in church. She was one of the desert dwellers, and as far as we know, she's the only example that I could find of a woman that did not cover her head. So I think my phone might still be working, but it's locked up right now. So let's see. I don't know if I'm actually still recording anymore because... all right. I think I'm still going. All right. So to continue on, this is the feminist movement. I'm going to hang out here on some of the saints for a moment until we get to the historical part. But first, let's go through some of the church canons, because one of the claims that people made in this comment section of the Orthodox Life, or whatever that was back there, where I found that, was that this is not a theological part of the church. And that is not true. So there are church canons that actually go over this. The canon from Canon 95 of the Council of Trullo states, and this is from 692 AD, but it says, "This canon affirms the practice of women wearing head coverings as part of proper behavior. It does not invent the practice, but assumes it as part of received tradition, especially in liturgical context." And the canon itself states, "We have received it canonically, handed down from the Holy Fathers, that those who are in the order of penitents, the women, should stand in the women's section having covered their heads or having their heads veiled. This shows that the idea of women veiling their heads is a normal expectation, especially when they are in church. So when you're outside of church, this is not so much the case. But when you're in church, the canon specifically addresses this context. There are other canons, of course. Canon 17 of the Council of Gengra from the 4th century is a regional canon, so it's not church-wide like the Council of Trullo was, but it states that if any woman, under pretense of asceticism, puts on masculine garments, or instead of the usual feminine attire, assumes male dress, let her be anathema. So it doesn't necessarily directly translate to that, but when it speaks of female attire, the normative female attire that we are seeing in the church, or that it's referring to, is things like head coverings. So that's part of that. There are the Apostolic Constitutions, which is Book 2 in the 4th century. It's not a conciliar canon, but it is a collection of church order that also instructs that let the women have their heads veiled. So it's a consistent trend or a consistent statement amongst the church fathers, which I haven't read yet, but I'm making the case that it's in church canons, it's in the Scripture, which I read to you from 1 Corinthians there, and then it's also amongst the church fathers. So I will be reading in a moment from the church fathers like Augustine, St. John Chrysostom. Tertullian writes about the topic, and I did jot that down here, but I'm not going to read from Tertullian because he became a heretic. But anyway, so where did this idea of church attire for women change? When did women stop wearing head coverings? So the early and patristic church, head coverings were obviously the norm. You don't find icons or anything of women in church without a head covering on. And then obviously, the Apostle Paul is pretty early in church history. So we read from his statement there. But through the early ecumenical councils and church fathers, women covering their heads in church was universally practiced and expected. This wasn't just cultural, it was seen as part of apostolic tradition and church discipline. Fathers like St. John Chrysostom and St. Augustine strongly affirmed the practice. In the East, the canons and the Council of Trullo, which I read from before, made it clear that head coverings were expected during worship. So it's not just a small t tradition like people will claim that it is. It is mentioned in the Fathers, and it's mentioned in church canons, and it's mentioned in the Scripture. So there's a gradual shift in the post-1800s. In Western Christianity, the breakdown began in the 19th and 20th centuries, especially after the feminist movements and the general loosening of traditional dress codes. By the 1960s, even the Roman Catholic Church, which had upheld head coverings until the Second Vatican Council, saw the practice largely disappear. Although Orthodox tradition does not follow Catholic magisterium, Orthodox communities in the West, especially in America, were influenced by the same cultural trends, and then this kind of made its way back to older countries. So you don't really see it in Slavic countries where they've abandoned it as much, but in Greece in particular, the feminist movement took hold and has continued to be part of Greek culture since that time. Ironically, you see like the leader, this was a major poster for the feminist movement, and she actually has a head covering on, which I think is kind of amusing. But yeah, I remember seeing this when I was a kid, and I thought she was pretty good looking actually, but I had no idea what it was about. So I was a teenager. Lord forgive me. So and then there's other styles. I wanted to. It was normative in America for women going to church to wear head coverings, and this took on different things in different places. So I showed you before, like Western style women in like Spain and Ireland, and then of course in Slavic countries. But here, even in America, those same traditions came over. But you see lots of black women in churches that normatively wore hats as head coverings. So I don't think that's like I don't think that's nothing. There's a reason that was the case. So this obviously was never formally abolished within the Orthodox Church. There's never been a synod or pan-Orthodox council that revoked or annulled the tradition of women wearing head coverings. And in many monastic and traditional parishes, especially in Rokor, Old Calendarist, and certain Greek monasteries, it is strongly upheld the practice of expecting that women would wear head coverings. The current state of orthodoxy in America, at least, is that traditional jurisdictions like Rokor, some Antiochian, and then Georgian parishes, the norm is that women will wear head coverings. Modern parishes are more westernized parishes, I guess, like the OCA and GoArch. It's less normal. Many women do not wear head coverings. In fact, the majority, probably, I would say, do not wear head coverings. What do church fathers say on this? I've read from the scripture where it discussed that women would wear head coverings according to St. Paul. I've discussed church canons, like the canon of Trullo. The Council of Trullo had rulings on women wearing head coverings. And then so I'll read from St. John Chrysostom and other church fathers. So in one place he criticizes those who neglect to wear head coverings, and he says some women are so brazen as to go into church with uncovered heads. What madness! Do you not know what your veil means? It is a mark of subjection, of authority over you. Of course, that authority is ultimately Christ. And then he also has a commentary on 1 Corinthians chapter 11, where he writes that the woman ought to cover her head, not at any time, but when she prays or prophesies. For this reason, the veil is a sign of subjection and modesty. And this is in his homily 26 on 1 Corinthians by St. John Chrysostom. St. John writes on the topic. Clement of Alexandria in the late 2nd century writes in Pedagogus, and the instructor, or the instructions, I guess, the instructor, I think is the translation there. Clement links head covering with modesty and femininity, and he writes that a woman should be veiled. It is not becoming for her to show herself with a bold face. And that is from Book 3, Chapter 11 of Poedagogus, or the instructor. So that was part of the larger lifestyle of Christian modesty for women, of Saint Clement of Alexandria. Saint Ephrem the Syrian writes in the 4th century, stating that let her veil be her humility, her silence be her beauty, and her modesty be her crown. So this is as direct as other women or other church fathers writing on women and head coverings, but he alludes to the veiling in his hymns and his writings about modesty and purity, especially among virgins and consecrated women. In Didascalia Apostolorum in the 3rd century, in the Syrian Church Manual, that's what it is, Didascalia Apostolorum, it says, let the women be veiled in the assembly, for this is fitting for her and shows her reverence. So this is a witness to liturgical norms throughout the East. All right, so these are writings and things that we can understand to cover both the church fathers, the example that we see in icons, in the scripture, and in church canons. So what do I think of women wearing the veil? I still probably would not tell a woman that I think you have to wear a veil or that you should wear a veil, but I definitely think that it probably should be the norm that women do. So I feel like it would be unnecessary to tell women that they have to, but as soon as women feel like they're ready to start wearing veils in church, I feel like if it's a question that's coming up, then I would never say anything to discourage the practice, and I think that probably it should be the norm but that's my opinion. I'm not a woman, so I'm not a priest. I don't have a pastoral role in any of this. I'm just sharing information from those things and some of my thoughts. So one thing that I thought was odd, and I feel like this kind of goes back to people like making responses out of their own issues, their own disagreements, or their own passions, was somebody responded and said something about like maybe if they weren't all like $90 or more. And so I thought that's a really weird statement. My wife has a number of head coverings that she wears to church, and we're not like rich people, so I don't think she's paying $90 for these head coverings for a piece. But I don't know. I don't really. I like checked how much she's spending on head coverings, but I went and looked at the prices, and what I found I think I googled women's head coverings or something like that, and the normal price was around like $10 or so, $13 there. 11, 19 for some. That one's kind of cool. It has a cross and some like symbols on it. That's interesting. So I went through a few, and I found one. This was $48. That was the most expensive one that I could find. So yeah, you will find all kind. Yeah, what I searched, women's head coverings. That's all that I searched, and that was what I came up with. Or women's head coverings for church, I think is what I typed in there. But anyway, I don't know where people come up with some of this stuff. I would definitely stay off of, the Orthodox life. This is not a place where you're going to get good information or good responses from people. If you all want to flood it with people that have more normative, more Orthodox views than the liberal docs people that seem to take over some of these pages, then by all means be my guest, but I'll probably leave the group soon because there's a lot of wackadoo people in there and I don't really like it. So you guys take it easy, and I'll talk to you in a video coming soon. If you're a lady that's thought I wish I could wear a head covering, but I feel weird because I would be the only one, then don't let other people discourage you. Maybe other women in your parish are just waiting on someone else to embolden them to follow what should probably be a normative Orthodox tradition. So don't let women discourage you or talk you out of it or make you feel bad or make you feel like you're judging them because of their own issues. Those are those women's issues. Don't let them affect you and what you do. So you guys take it easy, and I'll talk to you soon.